Have you ever wondered what a 68-year-old man feels when he hears a growl that doesn't come from his own dog? It was 3:47 a.m. I was sitting on the cold, dusty floor of the second floor of Thornwick Mansion, just outside of Asheville, North Carolina. The tactical flashlight flickered in my hand, not out of fear, but because the cold of the Appalachian Mountains penetrates to the bone, especially when you're nearly 7 decades old. Beside me, Rex, my 9-year-old German Shepherd, lay completely still. And when a combat-trained war dog stands still like that, you know something is wrong. Very wrong. The sound came from the empty hallway in front of me. A low, guttural, almost animalistic growl, but different. Rex wasn't growling back. He was watching. His ears didn't twitch, a sign that danger was near, very near. My heart raced, not for the first time that night, but this time was different. I'd been through a lot in my life. I'd served in Vietnam, trained dogs for military operations for over 30 years, survived desert storms, trekked through hostile territory where younger men had given up. But there, in that moment, at 68 years old, I felt something I hadn't felt in decades. Pure fear. Have you ever been there? That moment when your entire life experience just doesn't seem enough. When everything you've learned, everything you've lived, just doesn't explain what's happening in front of you. Thornwick Mansion isn't just an abandoned house. It's a place that's been carrying dark histories since 1983, when the family who lived there vanished without a trace. 7 people have entered the mansion in the last 40 years to investigate, explore, or simply challenge local legends. None of them have been seen again. Asheville authorities sealed the place off for decades, but the rumors have never stopped. Footsteps at night, objects moving on their own, shadows that shouldn't be there. Some say it's haunted. Others say something far more dangerous lurks within those decaying walls. But I didn't come here looking for ghosts. I came to test something much more real. How far the partnership between an old man and his war dog can go when everything around them seems to be conspiring against them. Stay with me until the end, because what Rex did in the 18th hour of this journey still keeps me up at night, and could be the difference between life and death in an extreme situation like this. At 68, you learn that brute force solves nothing. True survival comes from experience, emotional control, and strategy. And when you have a companion by your side who's trained to detect threats before they even become visible, your chances increase exponentially. But on that freezing dawn in the North Carolina mountains, neither my experience nor Rex's training seemed enough. What you're about to discover may surprise you, and perhaps even save your life one day, if you ever find yourself in a situation where fear tries to take over. Because the real challenge of this mission wasn't facing the unknown, it was mastering yourself when everything inside you screams to run. And then, at 3:48 a.m., Rex slowly turned his head to me. His eyes said something I'd seen before in combat zones. Get ready. Something's coming. You know, when I decided to take on this challenge and enter Thornwick Manor with Rex, I knew I was putting myself in an extreme situation. But what I didn't expect was to feel that intensity again. That feeling of being truly alive, on the edge, where every decision can mean everything. And that's exactly why I'm here sharing this story with you. Because if you've made it this far, if you're following every word, every detail of this journey, it's because you too understand the value of real experience, the courage to face the unknown, and the loyalty that exists between a human and their 4-legged companion. You're not just a casual spectator, you're someone searching for something deeper, something truer, And that's where I need to ask you something. If this kind of content resonates with you, if stories of real survival, extreme challenges, and overcoming challenges inspire you in any way, leave a comment below with what touched you most so far. Have you ever experienced a situation where fear struck you hard? Have you ever had an animal save your life or protect you in some way? Or perhaps you simply want to know what happened in the next few hours inside that mansion? Right below, I read every comment, and your story may inspire others watching. Hit that like button too, because it helps this video reach more people who, like you, value authentic content without exaggeration or sensationalism. Just the raw truth from someone who's lived it and is here to tell it. Your participation here is what makes this channel grow and reach more people with this kind of message. And if you haven't subscribed yet, subscribe now and activate the bell. Because every week I bring a new challenge, a new mission, always with Rex by my side, and you won't want to miss what's coming. This isn't just about numbers for me. At 68, I don't need fame or recognition, but I do need to know that the experience I've accumulated over decades, the lessons I've learned in combat and extreme situations, are reaching people who truly care. And you, who are here now, are part of this community of survivors, of people who don't give up, who don't shy away from the challenge. So, back to that moment. Rex stared at me, his growl echoing in the empty hallway, and my heart hammered in my chest. I had two choices in that moment: blindly trust my experience and Rex's capabilities, or let fear take over and abort the mission. But giving up was never an option for me. Not at 20, not at 40, and certainly not at 68. Who am I and why I took this challenge? My name is Robert Mitchell. I'm 68 years old, and I've lived in Asheville, North Carolina, for a little over a decade. But before arriving here in the tranquil mountains of Appalachia, my life was anything but peaceful. I was born in 1957 in a small village in Tennessee, the son of a mechanic and a schoolteacher. I grew up listening to war stories from my grandfather, who served in World War II. And I always knew that one day I too would don the uniform. At 18, I enlisted in the United States Army. It was 1975, and the country was still recovering from the wounds of Vietnam. Many young men of my generation were afraid to serve, but I felt a debt to my country, to my family, to the memory of my grandfather. I spent my first years in basic training and was soon deployed to special operations. I can't go into great detail about everything I did during my active service, but I can say that I learned to survive in conditions most people can't even imagine. Scorching deserts where water was more valuable than gold. Dense forests where every sound could mean an ambush. Icy mountains where the cold killed more than any enemy. I learned to read the terrain, trust my instincts, work as a team, and never, ever underestimate the unknown. These were hard years, years that marked my soul and shaped who I am today. But it was in 1982 that my life took a different turn. I was serving at a military base in Germany when I was invited to participate in a special training program for military dogs. War dogs, as we often call them. German Shepherds, Belgian Malinois, and Labradors trained to detect explosives. These animals weren't just pets or companions. They were four-legged soldiers, trained to save lives, detect threats, and work in perfect synchrony with their human handlers. I fell in love with this work immediately. I discovered I had a natural connection with dogs, an ability to understand their behavior, gain their trust, and transform them into absolutely reliable mission partners. I spent the next 28 years of my life training military dogs. I worked on bases in the Middle East, Europe, and Central America. I saw these animals save dozens of lives, including my own, on at least 3 occasions. In 2010, at age 53, I retired from active service. I received military honors, medals that I keep in a wooden box at home, and a pension that allows me to live with dignity. But retirement didn't mean the end of my relationship with war dogs. I continued working as a consultant, training civilian handlers, and participating in seminars and conferences on safety and survival. It was in 2016 that Rex came into my life. He was just 8 weeks old when I got him from a breeder specializing in working German Shepherds. From the first moment, I knew he was special. His eyes had that intensity, that piercing intelligence you only see in truly exceptional dogs. I spent the next few years training Rex personally, applying everything I'd learned over 3 decades of working with military dogs. Rex learned commands in 3 different languages. He learned to detect threats by scent, sound, and the behavior of those around him. He learned to work in absolute silence, to move in shadows, to protect without attacking. Today, at 9 years old, Rex is probably the best trained civilian dog in all of North Carolina. He's not just my companion. He's my partner, my extension, the half of me that sees what I can't. But why, at 68 years old, with a comfortable retirement life, would I agree to spend 20 hours alone in an abandoned mansion known for dark stories and unexplained disappearances? Why put myself at such risk? The answer is both simple and complex. Simple because, deep down, I've never stopped being that soldier seeking the next challenge, the next mission. Complex because there's something deeper to it all. At 68, you start asking yourself questions you didn't ask at 20, 30, or even 50. You start questioning your purpose, your legacy, what you'll leave behind when you're gone. I have no children. I've never married. My life has been dedicated to service, to dogs, to missions. And suddenly, when you retire, when the daily grind of training and operations disappears, you feel a void. Not a void of sadness or regret, but a void of purpose. And that's exactly what Thornwick Manor represented for me. A chance to prove, especially to myself, that I'm still capable. That age is just a number when you have preparation, experience, and a trusted partner by your side. Thornwick Mansion is about a 45-minute drive from Asheville, deep in the heart of the Appalachian Mountains. It's an imposing late Victorian building built in 1889 by a lumber industry magnate named Edmund Thornwick. The family lived there for nearly a century. But in 1983, everything changed. The last generation of Thornwicks simply vanished. Father, mother, and 2 adult children. No bodies were found, and no concrete leads emerged. Police investigated for months, but the case went cold and was eventually filed as an unsolved disappearance. The mansion has remained abandoned ever since. Over the years, 7 people entered the place with various intentions: urban explorers, ghost hunters, and thrill seekers. None of these 7 people returned. Some were officially declared missing. Others were simply never seen again. Local authorities eventually sealed off access to the property, but the legends only grew. They say footsteps are heard in the early morning. Objects move on their own. Shadows appear where there should be none. Some Asheville residents swear they've seen lights in the mansion's windows, even decades after it was abandoned. Some say the Thornwick family practiced dark rituals, that something was summoned there and never left. I am a man of faith, but I am also a man of science and reason. I don't blindly believe in ghosts or supernatural entities, but I've also learned throughout my life not to rule anything out completely. The world is full of things we don't understand, phenomena that science still can't explain. And most importantly, I know that abandoned places attract very real dangers. Wild animals, unstable structures, and malicious individuals who use these places for illegal activities. So when a friend of mine, a former military man like myself, challenged me to spend a night at Thornwick Manor, I immediately accepted, not to prove my courage or impress anyone, but to test my limits, to see how far my preparation and my partnership with Rex could go in an extreme situation. And also, I admit, out of pure curiosity, what really happened to those 7 people? What is it about that manor that inspires so much fear? I spent 2 weeks preparing for the challenge. I studied old maps of the property and floor plans of the mansion I found in city archives. I identified all possible entrances and exits, structurally dangerous areas, and places where wild animals might be hiding. I prepared a complete survival kit, tactical flashlights with extra batteries, long-lasting military rations, purified water, a first aid kit with everything I might need in case of injury, an emergency radio, tactical knives, ropes, heavy-duty duct tape, and even a gas mask in case I encountered toxic mold or other airborne contaminants. I trained Rex specifically for this challenge. We reinforced absolute silence commands, indoor threat detection techniques, and protective procedures in the event of a confrontation. Rex is an obedient dog by nature, but for this mission, I needed him to be at his peak performance. We conducted simulations in abandoned buildings in the area and trained at night in complete darkness, using only sound and smell as guides. I've also taken care of my own fitness. At 68, I no longer have the stamina of a 20-year-old, but I maintain a daily exercise routine. Long hikes in the mountains, bodyweight strength training, flexibility, and balance exercises. My blood pressure is under control. My heart is healthy, and my mind is sharp. Age has brought physical limitations, it's true, but it has also brought something no young person possesses. Decades of experience, refined emotional control, and the ability to make quick decisions under extreme pressure. The night before the challenge, I slept well. I wasn't anxious or nervous. I've been through enough life-or-death situations to know that anxiety only gets in the way. The key is to enter the mission with a clear mind, focused and ready to adapt to any situation. Rex slept beside me, as he always does. I woke up at 5 a.m., drank a strong cup of coffee, checked all my gear one last time, and loaded it into my old Jeep Wrangler. We left Asheville at 6:30 in the morning. The sun was just beginning to rise over the mountains, painting the sky with hues of orange and pink. It was a beautiful day, the kind that makes you thankful to be alive. Rex was in the passenger seat, staring out the window with that calm, attentive expression he always has. He knew something important was coming. Dogs always do. We arrived at Thornwick Manor at 7:15 in the morning. The main gate was locked with rusty chains, but I already knew that. I circled the property and found a side entrance that led to the back of the mansion. I parked the Jeep in a hidden clearing, out of sight from the main road. I donned my tactical vest, adjusted my backpack, strapped Rex into the special harness, and took a deep breath. I looked at him and said, "Ready, partner? Let's find out what this mansion hides." Rex wagged his tail once. That was all I needed in response. We walked together to the mansion's back entrance. The door was hanging open, resting only on a rusty hinge. I pushed it open carefully, and we entered. The smell of mold and decay hit my nostrils immediately. It wasn't the smell of recent death, but of decades of neglect, of rotting wood, of accumulated moisture. Daylight streamed in through broken windows, creating shafts of dusty light that cut through the darkness. The interior of the mansion was exactly as I'd imagined. Furniture covered in torn sheets, wallpaper peeling from the walls, ceilings stained with water, wooden stairs that creaked under the slightest weight. It was beautiful in a melancholy way, like a monument to time and decay. But I wasn't there to admire the architecture. I was there to survive 20 hours and discover the truth behind the legends. I turned on my tactical flashlight, checked the emergency radio was working, and began a methodical exploration of the ground floor. Rex was beside me, all his senses on high alert. The first few hours were peaceful. I explored the kitchen, the living room, the library, and a dusty study. I found personal belongings of the Thornwick family still scattered throughout the house. Photographs in broken frames, old books on the occult and rituals, handwritten letters that spoke of financial worries and family problems. Nothing to indicate the reason for the disappearance, but enough clues to show that life in that mansion was not as perfect as it seemed from the outside. At noon, I stopped to eat some military rations and give Rex some food and water. We sat together in a room that had probably been the family dining room. Sunlight streamed in through the windows, and for a moment, it almost felt like a normal house, just old and abandoned. Almost. It was in the afternoon, around 3 o'clock, that things began to change. I was on the second floor, exploring the rooms, when I heard the first strange sound. A scraping sound, as if someone were moving heavy furniture upstairs. But I knew there was no accessible third floor. I looked at Rex. His ears were perked up, alert, but he didn't seem alarmed, just curious. I climbed the stairs to the attic with extreme caution. The wood was rotten in several spots, and I had to test each step before putting my full weight on it. Rex climbed behind me, lighter and more agile. The attic was a vast space, filled with old boxes, antique trunks and furniture covered in decades of dust. Light streamed in through a cracked skylight in the ceiling. I explored the space for almost an hour. I found more family objects, old diaries, clothes stored in leather suitcases, but nothing that explained the sound I heard. No animals, no evidence of a recent presence. It was as if the sound had come from nowhere. I filed it away and went back down to the second floor. As the sun began to set, the mansion took on a completely different atmosphere. The shadows lengthened, dark corners became impenetrable chasms, even with a flashlight. The temperature dropped dramatically. The Appalachian Mountains are like that. Hot days and freezing nights. I put on a thermal jacket and adjusted Rex's harness to include a small LED light that would keep him visible in the dark. I chose a room on the second floor as my base for the night. It was a room that had likely been a private office, with only one entrance and a window overlooking the back of the property. Strategically defensible. I positioned my backpack in a corner, checked all my escape routes, and tested the strength of the floor and walls. Rex lay down near the door, guarding it. Night fell completely around 7 o'clock. And that's when the real mission began. Because surviving during the day in an abandoned mansion is one thing. Surviving during the night, when every sound is amplified, when your imagination starts to play tricks on you, when fatigue sets in and your senses become less sharp, is something else entirely. I had a clear plan, alternate between periods of wakefulness and controlled rest. Never sleeping deeply, always maintaining a level of alertness. Rex would take shifts with me. When I rested, he would watch. When he rested, I would watch. That was how it worked on military missions, and that was how it would work here. The early hours of the night were tense but manageable. I heard natural sounds, the wind rattling through broken windows, Small animals moving in the walls, probably rats or raccoons. The wood of the house creaking as the temperature changed. Nothing out of the ordinary for an old abandoned structure. But then, at 11:20 p.m., something changed. Rex, who had been lying peacefully, suddenly lifted his head. His ears stood completely erect. He stared at the closed door of the room we were in. He didn't growl. He didn't bark. He just stared. And that, for anyone who knows war dogs, is the most worrying sign of all. I grabbed my flashlight and got up silently. I approached the door and listened. Nothing. Absolute silence. But Rex continued to stare, unmoving. I slowly opened the door and shone the light into the hallway. Empty. Completely empty. But then I smelled it. A smell. It wasn't mold. It wasn't natural decay. It was something different. A faint, barely perceptible chemical smell, as if someone had recently burned plastic or rubber. This was strange, very strange. I closed the door again and made a mental note. Someone or something had been in this mansion recently. Not decades ago. Recently. The Cursed Mansion. History and mysteries. To fully understand what Thornwick Manor represents, you need to go back in time. Not just a few decades, but more than a century. You need to know the history of the family that built this place, the ambitions that drove them, the secrets they kept, and, ultimately, the mystery that consumed them. Edmund Thornwick was a visionary, but also ruthless. Born in 1851 in Boston, he migrated to North Carolina as a young man, drawn to the vast Appalachian forests and the untapped potential of the timber industry. At a time when timber was the gold standard of American construction, Edmund saw an opportunity to build an empire, and that's exactly what he did. By the age of 30, Edmund already owned 3 sawmills and controlled thousands of acres of forest. He wasn't just a successful businessman, he was a monopolist. He bought land at ridiculous prices, often taking advantage of the ignorance or desperation of local landowners. Historical records in Asheville show that Edmund faced at least 2 lawsuits for questionable business practices, but both were dismissed without further consequences. Money and political influence always prevailed. In 1888, at the height of his success, Edmund decided to build a mansion that would represent his rise. He hired architects from New York, imported materials from Europe, and brought in skilled craftsmen from various parts of the country. Construction took almost 2 years and cost a fortune that would be equivalent to millions of dollars today. Thornwick Mansion stood on a secluded hill, surrounded by dense forests and overlooking the mountains. It was imposing, elegant, and at the same time intimidating. Edmund married Margaret Blackwood in 1890, a woman 20 years younger than him, the daughter of an influential Charleston politician. The marriage was, by all historical accounts, more of a strategic alliance than a love match. Margaret was cultured, educated in European schools, and fluent in 3 languages. She brought an impressive library, works of art, and exquisite furniture to the mansion. But also, according to some contemporary accounts, she brought a peculiar interest in the occult, spiritualism, and mystical practices. The couple had 3 children: Edmund Jr., born in 1891, Catherine, born in 1893, and Thomas, born in 1896. The family lived in the mansion for decades, maintaining a dominant presence in the local community. Edmund Sr. continued expanding his business until his death in 1922 at the age of 71. Margaret lived for several more decades, managing the family fortune with an iron fist until her death in 1948. Edmund Jr. took over his father's business, but lacked the same talent or ambition. The lumber industry began to decline in the region. Competition increased, and the Thornwick fortune slowly began to dwindle. Catherine never married, living in the mansion her entire life, developing a reputation as an eccentric and reclusive woman. Thomas was the most successful of the three, becoming a lawyer and moving to Atlanta, but maintaining regular visits to the family estate. The third generation of Thornwicks is where the story begins to get truly murky. Edmund Jr. had 2 children, Richard, born in 1925, and Elizabeth, born in 1928. Both grew up in the mansion during the difficult years of the Great Depression and World War II. Richard served briefly in the army during the Korean War, but was discharged for medical reasons that were never fully clarified in military records. Elizabeth attended a private university, but returned to the mansion shortly after graduation, apparently without ever having worked in any profession. It was Richard who, in 1952, married a woman named Helena Marsh, of unknown origin. There are few records about her, which is strange in itself. The couple had 2 children, Marcus, born in 1953, and Diana, born in 1955. It was this family, the last Thornwicks to inhabit the mansion, who disappeared in March 1983. The disappearance was discovered almost by accident. A mailman noticed mail piling up in the mailbox. Close neighbors, who lived a few miles away, reported not having seen anyone from the family in at least 2 weeks. The police were called, broke down the front door, and found the mansion completely empty. There were no signs of a struggle, no blood, no bodies. The family's clothes were still in the closets. Food was spoiling in the refrigerator. Cars were in the garage. It was as if everyone had simply vanished into thin air. The police investigation lasted months. FBI agents were called in because of the possibility of kidnapping. Sniffer dogs were brought in, but found no trace beyond the property's boundaries. Bank records showed that no accounts had been used after the disappearance. There were no ransom notes, no witnesses, and absolutely nothing to explain what happened to those 4 people. The case quickly went cold. With no evidence, no leads, no body, there was no way forward. Richard, Helena, Marcus, and Diana Thornwick were officially declared missing, and the mansion was sealed by authorities. The estate fell into a years-long legal limbo, with inheritance disputes, back taxes, and bureaucratic issues that were never fully resolved. But the story didn't end there. In fact, it was just the beginning. In 1987, 4 years after the family disappeared, a group of 3 young college students decided to explore the mansion. They were horror story fans and amateur ghost hunters. They broke open a side window and entered at night, equipped with cameras, recorders, and flashlights. They told their friends they would stay there until dawn. None of the 3 were seen again. Their cars were found parked near the property, but no trace of them was found. The police conducted a thorough sweep of the mansion again. They found the students' equipment scattered throughout the ground floor, but no sign of the young men. The cameras were off, the recorders empty. It was as if they had simply disappeared, just like the Thornwick family. In 1992, a middle-aged couple, urban exploration enthusiasts, entered the mansion during the day. They told their daughter they would return before dark. They never did. Another massive search, still no results. In 1998, a lonely man, a former military man like myself, accepted a bet from friends to spend a night at the mansion. He was experienced, well-prepared, and had communications equipment. He maintained radio contact during the early hours, but at 3 in the morning, the contact ceased. When his friends went to the mansion at dawn, they found his equipment, but he was gone. And in 2003, the last recorded incident occurred. Two investigative journalists from a regional magazine decided to report on the mansion. They entered with professional cameras and audio equipment and were accompanied by a photographer. The three disappeared. This time the police found some footage. The recording showed normal exploration of the mansion during the first few hours, but then the camera captured something strange. A shadow moving quickly in a hallway where no one should have been. Shortly thereafter, the recording abruptly stopped. 7 people, 7 disappearances over 20 years, all without explanation, all without bodies, all without concrete leads. Asheville authorities finally decided to completely seal off the property in 2005. Fences were erected, signs were posted, and the mansion was officially declared a no-go area. Entering the property became a crime of trespassing, but the legends only grew. Local residents began reporting strange phenomena. Lights seen in the mansion's windows at night, even without electricity. Voices heard coming from the property. Animals avoided the area completely. Some swear they saw figures walking through the hallways, through the broken windows. Theories began to emerge. Some believed the mansion was truly haunted, that the spirits of the Thornwick family remained trapped there, perhaps because of some ritual Margaret had performed decades ago. Other theories were more earthly. Perhaps there was a network of underground tunnels beneath the mansion, used for smuggling or illegal activities, and the people who disappeared had fallen into death traps. There was also the theory that a serial killer used the mansion as a base of operations, luring curious victims and eliminating them so their bodies would never be found. Some speculated that criminal gangs used the place for illicit activities, and the more skeptical simply believed that the people who disappeared chose to disappear of their own free will, using the mansion as an excuse. I studied all these theories during my preparation. I read archived police reports that I was able to access through old contacts in the police department. I spoke with local residents who had lived in the area since before the family disappeared. I interviewed a retired detective who worked on 3 of the missing persons cases. What I discovered was both fascinating and disturbing. First, all the disappearances occurred during the evening or late afternoon. No one disappeared during the morning or early afternoon. Second, in all cases where equipment was left behind, the batteries were completely dead, even when new. Third, and this is the strangest, sniffer dogs refused to enter certain parts of the mansion, specifically the basement, and an area on the 2nd floor that corresponded to what used to be Margaret's bedroom. The former detective told me something that stuck with me. I don't know what's in that mansion, but I know there's something. I've investigated hundreds of cases in my career. Disappearances, homicides, kidnappings. There's always a logical explanation. There's always evidence. There's always a pattern. But Thornwick Mansion defies all logic. It's as if the place swallows people, and they simply cease to exist. He also mentioned something not mentioned in the official reports. On 2 occasions, search teams reported strange experiences inside the mansion. Sensations of extreme cold in specific areas, even in summer. The feeling of being watched. One officer swore he saw a female figure at the top of the main staircase, but when he went upstairs to investigate, no one was there. Another team member reported hearing whispers in a language he couldn't identify. This information wasn't included in official reports because it sounded irrational and unscientific. But the men who experienced it were trained professionals, skeptics by nature, not the kind of people who believe in ghosts or are swayed by superstition. As for the mansion's structure itself, I discovered some interesting architectural facts. The original blueprints show that Edmund Thornwick included a series of hidden passages and secret rooms in the design. This was not uncommon in mansions of the time, where wealthy families often had hiding places for valuables or escape routes in case of an invasion. But the number of secret passages in Thornwick Mansion was excessive. There were at least 5 listed in the original blueprints, and likely others that were never documented. There was also a large basement, much larger than would be necessary for a residence, even a mansion of that size. The original plans showed the basement to include several separate rooms, one of which was identified only as a special purpose room without further details. I tried to find more information about this room, but there was nothing in the public records. Margaret Thornwick, the matriarch who introduced the family's interest in the occult, kept detailed diaries. Some of these diaries were donated to the Asheville Historical Society after her death. I obtained access to them and spent an entire afternoon reading their entries. Most were mundane, descriptions of social events, thoughts on household management, complaints about the weather. But there were disturbing entries scattered throughout the years. In a 1912 entry, Margaret wrote, "We performed the ceremony as instructed by the ancient texts. The energy in this house has changed. I can feel something different, something powerful. Edmund doesn't understand, but I know we have opened a portal to something greater." In 1925, another entry, "Catherine has visions. She sees things others don't. Perhaps she inherited my gifts. Perhaps the house chose her." And in 1944, just 3 years before his death, "I made mistakes. We summoned something that should not have been awakened. I tried to reverse it, but it's too late. The house lives now. It has a will of its own. God forgive us for what we did." These entries may simply be the ravings of an elderly woman obsessed with mysticism, or they may hold the key to understanding what really happens in that mansion. Either way, they indicate that Margaret genuinely believed she had performed some kind of ritual that permanently affected the property. I also spoke with a local historian specializing in occult practices of the 19th and early 20th centuries. He explained that interest in spiritualism, secret societies, and mystical rituals was relatively common among the upper classes of the time. It wasn't just curiosity or entertainment. Many people genuinely believed they could access supernatural powers, communicate with the dead, or manipulate invisible energies. Margaret had documented connections with at least 2 esoteric societies of the time, the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn and a local branch of a Theosophical Society. Both practiced complex rituals that combined elements of various mystical traditions: Jewish Kabbalah, medieval alchemy, ceremonial magic, and Victorian spiritualism. The historian suggested that if Margaret did indeed perform rituals in the mansion, she may have used the basement as a private temple. The special purpose room mentioned in the original plans could have been built specifically for this purpose. He also mentioned that some rituals in these traditions involved opening portals or summoning entities, practices that practitioners believed literally worked. Now, I'm a scientifically minded man. I served in the military. I've worked with technology, and I trust tangible evidence. But I've also learned not to completely dismiss what I don't understand. The universe is vast and full of mysteries. Science still doesn't explain everything. And if there's even a slight chance that something paranormal is happening in that mansion, I needed to be mentally prepared for that possibility. But equally, and perhaps more likely, there were completely rational explanations for the disappearances. The theory I considered most plausible was structural traps. Old mansions have rotting floors that can give way without warning, unstable staircases that collapse, basements with hidden pits. It's possible that the 7 people who disappeared fell into some natural trap within the deteriorating structure, in a location where their bodies were never found by search teams. Another possibility was human presence. Criminals using the mansion as a hideout, drug dealers, fugitives, or even someone with more sinister intentions. The isolated mansion would be the perfect location for illegal activity. Curious intruders would be seen as threats or unwanted witnesses. I also considered the possibility of toxic gases. Old mansions can accumulate dangerous gases. Carbon monoxide from old heating systems, methane from organic decay, radon from underground rock formations. These gases can cause disorientation, hallucinations, loss of consciousness, and death. Affected individuals could wander disoriented and end up trapped in inaccessible parts of the structure. Each theory had its own logic, its own circumstantial evidence. None fully explained every aspect of the disappearances, but all were possible. And that was precisely why I needed to go there, to test these theories, to investigate with trained eyes, to see with my own eyes what that mansion truly hid. But above all, there was the question of legacy. 7 people entered that mansion and never left. Families lost loved ones without ever having answers. The mystery has remained unsolved for decades. If I could, with my experience and training, shed some light on these disappearances, if I could bring some answers, some closure to these tragic stories, then it would be worth any risk. It was with this heavy conscience, this self-imposed responsibility, that I entered Thornwick Manor that October morning. It wasn't just a personal challenge. It was a mission. One last mission for an old soldier who still believes he can make a difference, who still believes the truth deserves to be uncovered, no matter how dark or disturbing it may be. And as I walked the dusty corridors that first afternoon, with Rex at my side and the weight of history pressing down on my shoulders, I made a silent promise. I will leave here with answers. One way or another, the truth about Thornwick Manor will be revealed. Tactical preparation. How I prepared for the impossible. Preparing for a mission like this doesn't start the day before. It begins weeks in advance with meticulous planning, risk analysis, and specific training. At 68, I've learned that improvisation can save your life in emergency situations. But adequate preparation prevents you from getting into those situations. And when it comes to voluntarily entering a potentially hostile environment, preparation isn't optional. It's absolutely essential. I started by mapping out all the possible risks. I created an extensive list, divided into categories: structural risks, environmental risks, biological risks, human risks, and, for lack of a better term, unknown risks. For each category, I developed mitigation strategies and necessary equipment. The structural risks were the most obvious. A mansion abandoned for over 40 years would certainly suffer significant damage. Rotten floors that could give way under my weight. Unstable staircases, leaking ceilings that could collapse. Rusty nails protruding. Broken glass scattered across the floor. Walls with structural cracks. To deal with these risks, I would need tactical boots with reinforced soles, sturdy gloves, a protective helmet, and above all, cautious and deliberate movement. Every step would be tested before committing my full weight. I spent an entire afternoon studying the mansion's original architectural plans, which I had obtained from the municipal archives. I memorized the complete layout, the position of each staircase, the location of all the rooms, the documented secret passages, and the areas of greatest structural risk based on the original design. I also compared these plans with recent photographs I found online, taken by urban explorers who had visited the site in recent years. This gave me a sense of which areas had deteriorated most severely. I identified at least 3 emergency exit routes from any point in the mansion. If something went wrong, if I needed to leave quickly, I couldn't rely on a single route. I needed alternatives, options, tactical flexibility. I printed scale maps of the mansion, marked the routes with colored pens, and memorized each one. To this day, I can close my eyes and visualize the quickest route from the second floor to the back exit, passing through the kitchen and avoiding the main staircase that looked most damaged in the photographs. Environmental risks included temperature, lighting, and air quality. Temperatures in the North Carolina mountains in October can vary dramatically. Days of 25 degrees Celsius can turn into nights of 5 degrees Celsius or below. Hypothermia is a real danger, especially for someone my age. I prepared layers of clothing, a thermal base layer made of moisture-wicking material, an insulating mid-layer, and a wind-proof outer jacket. I also packed emergency thermal blankets, compact but extremely effective. As for lighting, I couldn't rely solely on natural light. The mansion had many windowless areas, and when night fell, it would be pitch black. I prepared a redundant lighting system, a main 1,200 lumen tactical flashlight, 2 smaller backup flashlights, a hands-free headlamp, and battery-free chemical glow sticks. I brought enough extra batteries to keep all the flashlights running for at least 40 hours, twice the mission duration. Air quality was a serious concern. Abandoned structures can harbor toxic mold, especially in damp areas. Mold spores can cause serious respiratory problems, particularly in older people. There was also the risk of the dangerous gases I mentioned earlier. I purchased a portable multi-gas detector capable of identifying carbon monoxide, methane, and other harmful gases. I also brought 2 respirator masks with appropriate filters in case I encountered areas with compromised air. The biological hazards went beyond mold. Abandoned mansions are ideal habitats for all sorts of creatures. Rats and mice are the most common, but you could also find raccoons, skunks, bats, and even snakes. In the Appalachians, we have rattlesnakes and copperheads, both venomous. There's also the possibility of ticks carrying diseases like Lyme disease, and venomous spiders like the brown recluse. To deal with these risks, in addition to the aforementioned boots and gloves, I prepared an extremely comprehensive first aid kit. It included antiseptics, bandages of various sizes, a tactical tourniquet, stinger extraction needles, tick tweezers, anti-inflammatories, pain relievers, antihistamines for allergic reactions, and even a snakebite kit with detailed instructions. I also brought broad-spectrum antibiotics, obtained through a doctor friend who understood the seriousness of the situation. Rex also needed protection. I bought him special dog booties made of durable material to protect his paws from broken glass and nails. He found them strange at first, but after a few days of training, he got used to them completely. I also prepared a basic veterinary kit, antiseptic for dogs, bandages, pain medication, and contact information for a 24-hour emergency veterinary clinic in Asheville. The human risks were perhaps the most unpredictable. There was the possibility of encountering other people in the mansion, urban explorers, homeless people seeking shelter, criminals using the premises for illegal activities, or even someone with violent intentions. I didn't want to assume that anyone I encountered would be hostile, but I needed to be prepared for the possibility. I'm not a fan of firearms in civilian situations. I believe guns unnecessarily escalate conflicts. Instead, I relied on verbal de-escalation techniques, non-threatening body language, and if necessary, non-lethal self-defense. I carried police-grade pepper spray, a tactical flashlight that can be used as an impact weapon if necessary, and a retractable baton. But more important than any tool, I brought decades of experience in handling tense situations, quickly assessing threats, and making decisions under pressure. Rex, of course, was my main line of defense. A German Shepherd trained for military operations is extremely intimidating. His mere presence would be enough to deter most people with malicious intent. And if the situation escalated, Rex was trained to immobilize without causing permanent damage, using restraint techniques I'd learned over 3 decades working with war dogs. Then there were the unknown risks. This category included everything I couldn't predict or rationally explain. The strange phenomena reported by witnesses, the experiences that defy logical explanation, and yes, the possibility, however remote, of something genuinely paranormal. For these risks, my preparation was more psychological than physical. I spent time meditating, strengthening my emotional control, and preparing my mind to not panic in the face of the unexpected. I read literature on the psychology of fear, on how the human brain can create frightening experiences through suggestion, expectation, and stress. Understanding that many seemingly supernatural phenomena have psychological explanations helped me maintain a rational perspective. But I also kept an open mind. If something truly inexplicable were to happen, I would need to be prepared to accept that reality without losing my composure. Mental rigidity can be as dangerous as panic. The key is to maintain a balance, skeptical enough not to accept fantastical explanations without evidence, but open enough to recognize when something is beyond my current understanding. Communication equipment was absolutely critical. I brought a cell phone with a spare battery and a portable solar charger. I also carried a long-range 2-way radio programmed to emergency frequencies. I also had a survival whistle clipped to my vest. Most importantly, I had left a sealed envelope with a trusted friend containing detailed information about where I would be, when I should return, and specific instructions on what to do if I didn't make contact within 24 hours of the expected time. This friend, a former army buddy named James, had strict orders. If I didn't call by noon the day after the challenge, he was to immediately contact the authorities and provide them with the envelope with all the information. I also left him temporary access to my bank account and legal documents in case anything happened to me. It may sound dramatic, but when you're entering a place where 7 people have disappeared, extreme precautions aren't overkill. They're wisdom. For food and hydration, I prepared military MRE rations, the ready-to-eat meals the Army uses. They're not tasty, but they're nutritious, have a long shelf life, and don't require refrigeration. I took 4, more than enough for 20 hours. For water, I brought 3 liters in sturdy bottles, plus water purification tablets in case I needed to use water from a source on the property. For Rex, I prepared special high-performance food designed for working dogs. I also brought training treats, useful for maintaining his motivation and reinforcing commands during the mission. And of course, collapsible bowls for food and water. Specific training with Rex began 3 weeks before the mission. We had to practice commands in environments similar to what we would encounter at the mansion. We visited abandoned buildings in the area, always legally and with permission when possible. We practiced moving silently in damaged structures, navigating in the dark using only flashlights, and responding to unexpected stimuli. One of the most important exercises was indoor threat detection training. Rex already knew how to do this, but we refined his skills. He learned to identify not only human or animal presence, but also subtle changes in the environment, air currents that could indicate hidden openings, chemical odors that could signal danger, unusual sounds that warrant investigation. We also practiced forced separation scenarios. If for some reason we were separated inside the mansion, Rex would need to know how to act. I taught him commands to look for exits, to return to the last point we were together, to emit specific beeps that would help me locate him. We practiced this repeatedly until it became second nature. A crucial aspect of training was aggression control. Rex is a protection dog, trained to neutralize threats. But within an unstable structure, a physical confrontation could be disastrous. He needed to know when to alert, when to intimidate, and when to actually act. We refined his ability to read my body language and respond appropriately. A specific touch on his harness meant alert, but not aggressive. Another touch meant preparing for a potential threat, and a specific verbal command meant active protection. We also worked on physical endurance. 20 hours is a long time, especially in a stressful environment. Rex needed to be in peak physical condition. We gradually increased the duration of our workouts, building endurance. In the last 2 weeks before the mission, we did several 12-hour sessions in challenging environments, simulating what we would face. For myself, physical preparation was equally important. At 68, I can't simply rely on my existing fitness. I'd intensified my exercise routine in the weeks leading up to it. Long walks with weights on my back, simulating the backpack I'd be carrying. Flexibility and balance training, essential for navigating uneven terrain. Functional strength exercises, focusing on movements I'd actually use, climbing, descending, squatting, lifting objects. I also meticulously took care of my overall health. I saw my doctor for a complete checkup. My blood pressure was under control. My heart was healthy for my age. No issues that could become medical emergencies during the mission. I adjusted my diet in the weeks leading up to it, focusing on anti-inflammatory foods and ensuring I was well nourished. The mental aspect of preparation was perhaps the most important. I spent time visualizing the mission, imagining different scenarios, and mentally practicing my responses. Visualization techniques are widely used by elite athletes and special forces personnel. They work. When you've experienced something mentally dozens of times, your brain reacts more calmly when the real situation occurs. I practiced breathing control techniques. Breathing is the most powerful tool for managing stress and fear. When you feel panic starting, when your heart races and your mind starts racing, controlled breathing can bring you back to center. I learned this decades ago in combat situations, and it remains relevant. I also studied historical cases of survival in extreme situations. I read accounts of people who survived shipwrecks, being lost in forests and natural disasters. I looked for patterns, lessons, and strategies I could apply. A recurring theme was the importance of remaining calm, of making rational decisions even under extreme pressure, of not wasting energy in panic or despair. I documented everything meticulously. I created a preparation diary, noting every step of the planning, every training session, every piece of equipment purchased. This diary would serve not only as a personal record, but also as a useful document if anything went wrong. James had instructions to hand this diary over to the authorities if I didn't return. I also prepared documentation equipment for the mission itself. I brought 2 rugged action cameras with extra batteries and high-capacity memory cards. One would be attached to my tactical vest, recording continuously. The other would be positioned so I could quickly access specific footage. I also brought a high-quality audio recorder, capable of capturing sounds I might not notice at the time. The idea was to document everything. If I actually found evidence that explained the disappearances, I'd need proof. If I witnessed something unexplainable, I'd need a record. And if something happened to me, the recordings could provide crucial clues about what happened. I set the cameras to automatically upload to a cloud server whenever they detected an internet signal, even though I didn't expect to have a signal inside the mansion. But if something was recorded and I managed to leave the building, the upload would happen automatically. It was an additional layer of security, ensuring the information wouldn't be lost, even if I lost the physical devices. The night before the mission, I organized all the equipment in my living room. It was impressive to see everything spread out. The backpacks, the electronic devices, the tools, the food, the water, the medical kits, the clothes, the maps. Each item had a specific purpose. Each item could potentially save my life or Rex's. I spent hours double-checking everything. I tested every flashlight. I checked every battery. I confirmed that every tool was functional. I organized everything in my backpack logically. Items I needed to access quickly were in easy-to-reach external pockets. Emergency medical equipment was in a specific, clearly marked section. Food and water were distributed to balance the weight. The final backpack weighed approximately 15 kilos. It's not light, but it's not unbearable either. I'd trained with a similar weight for weeks, so my body was adapted. The tactical vest added a few more kilos, but distributed the weight ergonomically. Rex also had his own special harness, with small side pouches where I put a few essentials. Extra water for him, treats, a compact veterinary medical kit, and an emergency LED light that could be activated if we needed to signal our position. I slept surprisingly well that night. Some people might be anxious, but I was at peace. I had done everything in my power to prepare. The outcome was now completely beyond my control, and accepting that brought peace. I learned long ago that you can only control your actions and preparation, not the results. I did my part. The rest would be revealed in the next 20 hours. I woke up at 5 in the morning, as planned. I ate a substantial breakfast, eggs, oatmeal, fruit, and strong coffee. I needed energy for the day ahead. Rex received his meal too, a generous portion of his high-performance dog food. I dressed methodically. Thermal layer first, then sturdy tactical pants with multiple pockets, long-sleeved t-shirt, tactical vest on top, lightweight jacket that could be removed if it got hot, perfectly fitted tactical boots, which I'd already broken in for weeks, sturdy tactical gloves that allowed for finger dexterity, cap with integrated LED light, safety glasses that also served as eye protection against flying debris. I put the harness on Rex, adjusted all the buckles, and made sure it was comfortable but secure. I attached the retractable tactical leash that would give me control if needed, but also allow him to move freely when appropriate. I loaded everything into the Jeep. I made sure the fuel tank was full. I checked the tires for proper pressure. I stocked up on basic emergency tools, a jack, a lug wrench, and a jumper cable. If something went wrong with the vehicle, I needed to be able to handle it myself. I drove to the mansion with my mind focused, mentally reviewing the plan. Arrival at 7:15. Initial exploration of the outer perimeter. Entry through the rear. Systematic sweep of the ground floor. Establishment of a base point on the second floor. Gradual exploration of all areas. Constant documentation. Increased surveillance after dark. Survival until dawn. Departure and return at 8 dawn the next morning. Simple on paper. But I knew that no plan survives its first contact with reality. The key would be to adapt, improvise when necessary, but always maintain the fundamental principles. Safety first, constant documentation, never assume anything, trust your instincts but verify with reason. As I parked the jeep in that hidden clearing and looked up at Thornwick Manor looming through the trees, I felt a mixture of anticipation and deep seriousness. It wasn't fear. It was recognition of the significance of what I was about to do. 7 people had entered this place and never left. I would be the 8th to attempt it, but I had something none of them likely had. Professional-grade military training, decades of survival experience, and a 4-legged companion as capable as any human soldier. I put my hand on Rex's head and said, "We're ready for this, partner. Let's find out the truth." First 5 hours, rising tension. The mansion's back door creaked as it was pushed open, a sharp sound that echoed through the empty interior like a warning cry. I paused for a moment in the doorway, allowing my eyes to adjust to the change in lighting. The contrast between the bright October morning light and the dim interior was dramatic. Rex stood beside me, completely still, only his nostrils moving as he processed the barrage of olfactory information the abandoned environment offered. It was exactly 7:23 in the morning when we took our first step into Thornwick Manor. I immediately activated the camera on my vest, beginning the continuous recording that would document the entire experience. The audio recorder was also activated, capturing not only voices, but all ambient sounds that could be relevant for later analysis. The first room was what had formerly served as a pantry and laundry area. Empty shelves lined the walls, covered in thick layers of dust. The wooden floor was visibly damaged, with loose boards and some areas where the wood had completely rotted away, revealing the empty basement space below. I carefully tested each step before transferring my full weight, using a trekking pole I'd brought specifically for this purpose. The smell was exactly what I expected. Predominant mold, damp, decaying wood, ancient dust. But there was also something more subtle, a vaguely chemical odor that I couldn't immediately identify. It wasn't strong enough to set off my gas detector, but it was there, persistent. I made a mental note to pay attention if this smell intensified in specific areas. Rex explored alongside me, staying close but investigating every nook and cranny with professional interest. His body language was relaxed but alert, which reassured me. If there had been immediate danger, he would have signaled it. Dogs have much sharper senses than humans. If Rex was calm, I could be reasonably confident that there were no obvious threats nearby.